permission so we can show it to those who are not here. But the goal for this meeting was also not to make any decisions, but rather exchange more ideas for possible research projects, papers, and again, at the same time, kind of look around and see who could be potential co-authors for those projects. And those of you who attended last meeting know that we already have a few papers on the table, or a few promising ideas that have been proposed. But I know there are more ideas, floating around. So maybe let's discuss them, provide maybe some initial feedback, make sure that it's something that can be done with Xculture data, and start looking at who can be working on what and with whom. So I'm not sure who wants to start. I know that Charles Wankel said he had some new ideas, but it looks like he just dropped out again. Oh no, he's here. So, and I'm not sure about others. Any ideas for studies?
Okay,
Anyone?
I will go first because I was not there at the last meeting.
Would you like me to have a quick overview of the several ideas we discussed last time? Would that be helpful? Seems like most people who are here today were there last time, but
yeah, I read the document too.
Okay, well then let's move on. So if we have time, maybe at some point we'll take a quick break and review what we discussed last time. But yes, so Zandra wanted to go first, right?
Yeah, it was just about,
go ahead.
I read the document, and well, there are lots of interesting ideas. And I tried to mix a little bit with what I was, what I presented when I sent my ideas, which was the frugal mindset. And so I thought the creativity, it would be the best match in terms of, looking at in terms of innovative process, which could be related to creativity or not. And trying to coordinate that according to the nationality. Trying to do different groups from developed countries and emerging countries, where you should, you could try to assess what kind of different creativity process they went through. So I believe we have enough data to do that.
We probably have the data. Can you explain a little bit better the sort of the mechanism that you're trying to test, or what would be the constructs that we will be looking at?
Yes. So the first question, it's about, is the innovative process different according to the nationality? So try to evaluate the difference between people from emerging countries and developed countries. So there are different ways to do, but all what was suggested by William Johnson already incorporates that kind of solution. For example, trying to find out what kind of creative solution may be the result of the project that was proposed. And I add to that the budget. So because he was asking about if a non-creative idea versus feasibility, if it would be also something, that we can understand like it's good. But I was thinking that the budget, for example, the use of the resource that they gave to the project, it can be one of the points to see how creative they were. So it was about the new ideas, but also how they composed with, the resource that they had.
The challenge with creativity will be, as we discussed last time, it's a construct that is extremely difficult to quantify, and I would like to stress that it's not because Xculture doesn't have good data. It seems to me that in reality, I mean, creativity, it's like, I don't know, everybody understands the term, but nobody can really tell how to measure it. Like, what is creativity? How would you put it in numbers? And especially if the task is not, writing a novel or I don't know, building some sort of, I don't know, structure. But when the task is business related, as it is in our case, it becomes very challenging whether or not, like, what would constitute a creative solution. So let's say there is a company, and the company says, we have a product, which is basically X-Culture's typical challenge. We have a product, we operate, let's say, in Germany. We would like to expand into new markets. Could you help us, do some market analysis, competition analysis, determine which markets would be most suitable for a product like this one, describe the market for us, develop a marketing strategy for that country, recommend shipping options if it's a physical product, recommend where and how we can hire people, how much we should pay, what's the best pricing strategy, and things like that. And so most of those issues, they really don't leave much room for creativity. I suppose when it comes to marketing strategy, there may be something there that we would call creative solutions, like creative slogan or something else. But even there, so let's say a team says, I think you should advertise on Facebook, or we think that you should advertise on TV, and this is why, and here are the calculations, and this is what the budget should be, and this is how we recommend you kind of frame your message. I mean, so is that creative or not? Likewise, shipping. So they say we think we should, but
instead of using creativity, I was thinking more in terms of innovative process, or the creation that they use to create the idea.
Right, creativity as creating, as opposed to being unusual. So that we have a lot. So
yes, so that's why I thought it would be better. For example, they use Facebook, but is it a good idea or bad? It depends on the way they will deploy the strategy. So the way they use their resource, which means financial and human resource, for example. So I believe it's more tangible when you put that way. Then that's why I didn't use, in fact, I didn't use the name creativity when I wrote in the document something, but I used innovative process. So I would like to describe the process and compare the process between these two categories of persons, so coming from developed and emergent countries, which is basically what I'm studying right now.
Yeah, as somebody put in the comments, yes, Miguel, maybe there is some literature on that. But as I said, I've been always struggling with that. And in different semesters, we actually try to go, as far as we can measuring creativity. First, every semester we do ask, when the professors evaluate the final reports, there is a separate category specifically for creativity and innovativeness. The question literally asks the raters to evaluate the reports in terms of how creative, innovative, and unconventional the recommendations are. For a few semesters, we asked to do that with respect to every single question. Like, how good is the HR strategy? Is it innovative? How good is the marketing strategy? Is it innovative? So we tried to separate specifically the viability, economic viability, and then innovativeness of it. And as I said, it's not always, innovative is not always economically viable, and the other way around. So it's, kind of tricky. And then, as I said, in some semesters, we even tried to kind of reduce the halo effect, because again, when people like the report, they give high grades on everything, including creativity, and vice versa. When they don't, they give low on everything, even if there is something creative. So we extracted like basically abstracts, or, like a one paragraph descriptions of the product, and asked independent raters to rate them independently on economic viability and creativity as unusual solution. And so we have those ratings as well. But as I said here, it's a little bit difficult to capture the process if we talk about innovativeness. But if we talk about creativity as the creative process of creating something, it doesn't have to be unusual, doesn't have to be innovative, it's just the process of creation. In that case, we do have a lot of data. So as I said, we probably have as good a data as physically possible to obtain. I always struggled with, we sort of know what innovativeness is, but all of a sudden it's hard to put it in numbers. Like that hearing about the pornographic images, if you remember that famous case in the U.S. Senate, they were trying to define, what constitutes pornography. And one of the senators said, I cannot define it, but I know it when I see it. So kind of same thing here. You kind of know what it is, but how do you, describe it numerically, and up until point it is, regular, and then after which point it becomes innovative, that's where it becomes a little tricky and subjective. So yeah, I don't know. But yes, we do have a lot of data that probably can be used and probably are as good as from any other source, so if we wanted to look at it.
Okay, and
At the
I
very least, we have.
agree with William that he says creativity is new plus useful.
Yeah.
So we can measure useful or usability, and the newness. Well, this is more open, but anyways.
And I may be overthinking it, because for every single semester, for every single team, we do have the creativity score, which is an average of like 5, 6, 7 experts. And even though there may be some subjective error in those ratings, presumably if you look at enough teams and enough ratings, that error will be more or less canceled out. So if you wanted to take that single score as your outcome, we have it. And I think it's as defensible as any other measure of creativity in any other study. So maybe I'm just kind of overthinking it too much. And I guess if you don't provide too many details in the description of your methodology, the reviewers will not even question that approach. I'm just saying that, as I said, we always wanted to capture creativity, and I just don't know if it's even possible to do it in a way that is, perfect, comprehensive, objective, reliable, and all of that.
I'm not sure how, because I missed the first 5 minutes, but maybe I can come in on Sandra's ideas with creativity. Because we have actually made an analysis for cultural diversity and the impact on creativity, and we were using 2 indicators for that. One is the one that Vas already highlighted with the ratings of the reviewers, which is actually also quite nice because it's another source of data, not like self-evaluated creativity. And there is a meta-analysis provided by Stahl and colleagues who have also analyzed the effects of diversity, team diversity, and creativity, and they present like a synopsis of different measurements for creativity. And from that, you can see that there are a lot of different measurements. So there is no standard instrument, which is good in a sense, because then you can very easily argue that you are just among the many researchers that use their own creativity rating. So I think that should be fine. And if you are interested in the first ideas of results on diversity and creativity, there's a very nice PowerPoint presentation and a video uploaded to YouTube by 2 master thesis candidates of mine who have already, with the X-Culture data set, analyzed this relationship. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's the first interesting indication to see how much music is in the data for that. And we have also played around a little bit with different diversity measures and the impact on creativity. That could also be helpful. So when we meet in Denmark, I think I can provide some.
That would be very helpful, yeah. Mm-hmm. By the way, those who don't know, Nicole, who just spoke, so she's the local host. So she's the one who's making all those arrangements related to housing and food. And that's her university that will be hosting us. And at least on my, and at least on my screen next to her is Alex Assad, who is co-organizer, and so he is more responsible for the program. So Nicole is kind of on the grounds housekeeping in the program, and Alex is more responsible for the kind of bigger issues. So they have spent already a lot of time and probably will spend much more making this event possible. Yeah, this creativity thing seems very promising, and I think that there may be several papers hidden there. So we definitely should look at it, as long as we have, a pioneer, a champion for this idea. So it seems like it's a hot topic, and we do have good data, or some data at least. So there are probably multiple opportunities there. Any other ideas? Maybe, I don't know. Oh, yeah, David is raising hand. Yeah, just unmute your microphone. I think, David, your microphone, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just got it right. I'm still doing some lit review and research to narrow down a potential topic, but I just recently ran across a paper that we could possibly build on, or I'd like to build on, Vaz, that actually you wrote, a Journal of World Business paper on cultural values, emotional intelligence, and conflict handling styles that you did with Mariana Gunkel
Mariana.
and Christopher
Yeah,
Schlegel.
Mariana can't attend today. She has a horseback riding competition or something. But yeah, so that's her. Yeah. She will be at the event though.
Oh, good. Because, maybe, and you can tell me, and I won't be insulted if I'm going down the wrong track here, but you put together a really interesting paper there on conflict handling styles and conflict management. And what I'd like to do is maybe build on that in a different direction than cultural values and emotional intelligence, and move it, do a similar type study or a similar type analysis that involves what I've become pretty interested in, this face negotiation theory. And I don't think anybody's done anything about that with X culture. The concept of face, and both self-face and others face in a digital virtual team environment is pretty interesting. There's a lot of literature on it. That's the kind of the trick, is to find a little niche in that literature, but I think we can. And you had mentioned in the last meeting that you needed someone to work on the leadership angle. To me, I could see at least 3 papers coming out of something like this, with a dependent variable of leadership on one paper, conflict management styles on another paper, and then possibly uncertainty avoidance on another paper. I mean, you could do one big paper with a lot of those variables in it, but I'm kind of a believer in parsimony and not getting too complex with these models. But
how would you measure that face construct?
I've got the construct. It's Utzel and Ting Toomey from 2003. There's a construct that they developed. It's I think a 23 item scale. Now we would have to collect the data there.
That's the question. So is it something we already have, or something that we would measure moving forward in the future?
No, it'd be something we'd have to measure moving forward, at least for 1 or 2 sessions. I mean, the sample sizes with X culture are so large. If we could add it to one of the sessions and pick up 1,000 data points, I think we'd probably be pretty good with some of at least an initial study 1 to take a look at the hypotheses in further detail.
Yeah, so it may be something again for the fall semester. So would be nice, if we had the data now, so we can use them at the hackathon. But we may not be able then to use it for this cycle. It would have to be maybe next one.
And I understand that.
Unless, again, if we take a closer look at what they put in that phase, I bet we will have something that will be probably a good enough substitute. So I will not be surprised if we have something.
We can certainly look at that.
Yeah.
They look at self-face, other face, the independent self, interdependent self. And then they actually use the same measurement you did on your paper on conflict styles, which is
we actually have several measures of conflict resolution styles. We used another one later on. So yeah.
But they used that same one from literature that you used. Yeah. They just didn't use all 5 of the items all 5 of the constructs that you used. They used only 3.
Yeah. I wonder if it would be helpful, again, I'm not sure of how much time you had to spend with, going through the data that we have, but would it be helpful if I reviewed like 10 minutes, all the main big blocks of kind of constructs that we have measured over the years? Like obviously, about demographics, but there are some things that maybe some of you are not aware that we have them. Would that, it
would help me. I've got a printout. I printed it out now and went through the individual items. And I just didn't do it as it related to that topic, but I'm sure you're right that there's something in there that might be spun in a certain way that may not involve collecting extra data or the time that would take. If others want you to go through it, I'm fine with that.
Maybe, as I said, just a couple of minutes. So if you see my screen here, is it showing the screen with an Excel file?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have a lot of demographics. Then every semester we ask students to get to know each other, and we have 1, 2, or even 3 rounds of acquaintanceship test where we test how well they know each other. Questions like, does this team member have a pet at home? And, the answer is either right or wrong. Arranged friendship, that's something that was specifically collected for a study. I guess that's a little more sociological, probably not relevant for us. Attribution bias, every semester we ask students a series of questions to see if they tend to attribute problems and achievements to themselves or to circumstances. Barriers to effectiveness of a global virtual team. At the beginning of each project, we ask them what they expect to be a challenge. And then at the end of each project, we ask them what was a challenge. Or rather, we ask, to what extent do you think this will be a challenge? Language differences, time zone differences, all that kind of stuff. And at the end, we ask, to what extent was it a challenge? And so we want to see how people's expectations differ from the actual experiences. But we also can use that as, we know what they said was a challenge. Again, could be potentially either an explanation for something, or maybe by itself can become an interesting, like what predicts what people expect to be a challenge, or what predicts what was actually a challenge. A bunch of questions about coaching. So we provide coaching services, and so ask, did they use coaches? Did they, find it helpful and stuff like that. Everything and anything possible on communication. So who communicates with whom, how long, what tools they use, how many minutes they spend in video calls, how many messages they send, how frequently. So when it comes to communication, we literally, communication preference styles and stuff like that. So just about anything you can think of, including, we ask them, how much do you expect to communicate and what tools you expect to use before the project starts, but then what they actually used and how they actually communicated. So frequency, duration, methodology, everything possible related to communication. Again, I kind of suspect communication will be a big predictor of many things, maybe a moderator, but also could be an outcome, what predicts how they choose how to communicate and things like that. A lot of questions related to conflict, and so every single week we do ask if the team had any conflicts or misunderstandings, and we asked it in many different ways, with a single question, how many problems you had or conflicts you had, to more specific, how many interpersonal, how many task related, how many process related conflicts you had. And then also very detailed questionnaires where there would be like 20 questions, asking about each, The beauty about conflict measures is that we measure it every single week. So if anyone is good with the time series analysis or some longitudinal analyses, we can look how those things develop over time, how, conflicts in week 5 lead to problems in week 6 or the other way around, what leads to conflicts. Could be also a lot of research on asymmetries in perceptions of conflict. I always wanted to do that study, just don't really know how. But when you ask different team members how many conflicts you experienced in your team, some people say none, and some people say 25. And then it becomes interesting, is it something that it's just a perception difference, or is it something that, different sub-teams have different, conflicts? Again, it would be interesting to look at that in different ways. And as I said, conflict resolution styles, we measured it in several different ways in some semesters.
Well, Vaz.
Yes.
Let me ask a question. I did look at the data, and I'm looking at it right now, and it's possible, and maybe I'll focus on that for Denmark if it's worth it. The BCIQ scale that you developed, and it's it's much more in depth than the general CIQ scale that's out there.
Yeah.
Now there's some verbal, nonverbal measures there, and other things that could be used possibly as proxies for face or the concept of face. I mean, it would have to be defended appropriately in the paper, because we really couldn't go with that face negotiation theory, but we could relate it to face negotiation theory and then maybe pursue that later with something else.
That's what I was saying, that even though we may not have the original 21 item scale, we may have something that is kind of tapping into the same concept.
Right. And I think your BCIQ scale, from what I'm reading right here, kind of does tap into some of those,
very possible,
some of those areas, along with, maybe some other proxy constructs. I'll go through that. I don't want to waste everybody's time or spend too much on it. But I'll definitely go deeper into the data set and see what kind of proxy constructs are already there, and see if I can build a decent model that's looking at.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
All right.
A couple more minutes just to finish this up. So again, if anyone wanted to study conflict, again, what leads to conflicts, conflict asymmetries in conflict perceptions, or antecedents of conflict, we have a lot of data. Scheduling coordination, ask every single week, do you know what needs to be done? Do you, have a schedule for your, remaining tasks and things like that? Again, longitudinally every single week, so we know how those things develop over time. Again, can be an interesting predictor, but also an outcome. Then we have a huge list of CQ measures. We measured it every possible way. We developed 2 of our own instruments, used like 3 or 4 existing instruments. So a lot of questions related to CQ, cultural intelligence. Again, cultural intelligence can be a predictor, but also we can look at, like for example, one study I always wanted to do is just like Hofstede and Globe gave us the list of countries and the cultural values, like America is individualist, China is collectivist, whatever it is. So we can maybe have the same rankings for cultural intelligence, I don't know, more and less culturally intelligent countries, maybe even trying to explain why. So, again, would be an interesting, relatively easy, but an interesting study to do. All kinds of data on cultural background, where they come from, where the parents are, do they feel like they can connect to multiple cultures, maybe bicultural family, maybe born in one country, raised in another. So again, could be possibly an interesting predictor of all kinds of things. Cultural values, every possible way, many instruments. We actually talked with Anna here that maybe we can do a study where we compare the quality of those instruments, and I think we used 9. And so we can look at simple things like, internal reliability syntactic structures, but also maybe predictive validity and things like that. So we have a lot of those. Emotional intelligence, started measuring it recently, but have a few semesters. Again, a potential moderator, predictor, maybe even outcome. So globalization bias, it's a complicated one, so for a specific study. Grit, measure every semester. Now there is a lot of talk about how it's important to be persistent, never give up, keep going. And so we have a scale for that specifically, so measure that. All kinds of questions related to language proficiency, both in English, but also a number of languages people speak and things like that. Could be a big thing. So language proficiency, especially in the working language, can be a very important moderator or predictor. All kinds of stuff on leadership. Who is the leader? How many leaders your team has? What kind of leadership structure the team has? Is it one leader, multiple leaders? So all those, or no leader at all. So locus of control, kind of related to that attribution bias type of thing. So again, potentially could be moderator. Motivation, both every week, how motivated do you feel to keep working on this project with your team? But also motivations like, why do you participate in this project? Is it mandatory? Do you want to learn more about IB or any other reasons? And again, much of that is longitudinal, trying to see how it changes over time. How active the team members are. So again, how many are active, how active they are at different types of the project. Again, it could be one of the outcome variables. Presumably, the more active they are, the better. So, what predicts how many team members participate, or as a predictor. So if not everyone is participating actively, what kind of problems does it lead to? So those kinds of things. So all kinds of questions related to participation, and ask it every possible way, self-report, other report, and stuff like that. This block of questions that Justin started working on, when people are active during the day, when people can work on the project during the day, when people are expected to work on the project during the day. The idea there is that maybe time zone differences are not a problem if they allow an alignment for peak performance, essentially. If you have someone in Asia who's active at night, someone in Europe who's active in the afternoon, and someone in the United States who's active in the morning, the fact that they're in different time zones is actually a good thing, so may help here. Likewise, global relay, all that stuff. Peer evaluations, every possible way, a huge block, asking every single week, so we have a lot of that. Perceptions about how similar or different the team members are. and perceptions about how easy or difficult they think it would be to work with people from those countries, asked at the beginning and at the end of the project. We used it once for one of the studies to see if people, after participating in this project, if they feel that they're less different, but we didn't really do much else with it. And it was like a side construct in one of the big projects. So maybe we should do a separate study to see on what predicts, those kind of perceived differences, psychic distance as they call it, and how that psychic distance relates to all kinds of things. So if I think that we are different, does it impact my performance dynamics or not? Personality measures, big 5, and then some other personality scales, not big 5. How punctual people are. So we know the deadline and we know when they actually submit weekly deliverables. We can take the difference and see who is submitting their work earlier, who misses the deadline, potentially a study there. Readiness tests. So as at the beginning, we ask all kinds of questions about the project, about global virtual teams after they take a training. So it can be used as a proxy for IQ, I guess, in this case. All kinds of satisfaction measures with the project, with the team members, with quality of their work, all kinds of that. So self-efficacy, again, are you confident that you can complete individually, that your team will complete on time? So measured, by the way, every single week. So we measure enjoyment, motivation, self-efficacy, and clarity every single week. And we can look at that, how it changes over time. So all kinds of questions related to socioeconomic status, to trust, and again, some of the trust questions would be asked every week and some just at once. Several measures of team climate. And so here we have team climate in general, perceptions of safety in the team, how safe it is to voice disagreement or take risks and stuff like that. So have a lot of those. Some team culture measures, team efficacy, similar to self-efficacy, just related to team. Team identification, how much people feel as part of the team, how much people feel that they belong to the team. Again, could be a useful outcome, but also potentially a predictor. Every week we do ask, this one actually could be a study. I don't know why we do it, we never used it, but I kind of have a feeling that it may be useful in many studies. The model of team development stages, forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. So we sort of kind of know when those stages should be happening, but we are not sure how teams progress through them. And so every week for many semesters now, we ask every team member every single week what stage of development their team is at. So they see all 5 with little definitions. And it's very interesting. So we can see, some teams achieve performing like after 3 weeks. Some teams never achieve it. Some teams achieve performing, then go back to storming, then back to performing, back to storming. And the most interesting thing is that there are a lot of asymmetries. Some team members tell us, oh, we are definitely at performing. And others say, oh, we are still at storming. Again, looking at those asymmetries may be an interesting study. So again, on one hand, how difference in their predictions of what stage of development they are affects team performance. So if everyone agrees that we are at this stage versus everybody gives us a different answer. But also what predicts those asymmetries, why in some teams people cannot agree on where they stand and in others they can. And so again, this seems like an interesting study. So it could be longitudinal, could be something, sectional, cross-sectional, but I kind of suspect there may be something interesting hidden here. And I think I mentioned trust. So, and then a bunch of new variables that we just added. Team climate, team member exchange scales. So those kinds of things. So again, not sure if any of those seem relevant to your specific studies you have in mind, but it seems to me that there are several potentially new studies right there. So any comments, any new ideas, or any responses to the list of the available variables?
Well, I'm interested in, as I mentioned last time, looking at sustainability ideas in the business plans to see if the ideas are changing or if there are more of them over time, since 2010. And I noticed online there are articles that look at the development over time of strategic positioning of destinations, websites about destinations in the, tourism. And so there are sort of analogous kinds of studies. In looking at leadership, which was a topic you said people might, walk into. I noticed a lot of exciting articles in 2019. One article that caught my eye had to do with the mix of national cultures on a global virtual team, where are they less likely to share the same, excuse me a second, are they less likely to share the same leadership expectations if there's a greater mix of national cultures? So sort of looking at the extent that there's international diversity, greater international diversity on the team, would result in a greater diversity of expectations, let's say, for leadership. And I've seen an article by Van Wart and crew in the International Review of Administrative Sciences in 2019, where he has this taxonomy of e-leadership skills. And basically, he goes through skills like communication, social skills, team building, change management, technological trust. But he does, each one is framed as a special e-skill. In other words, not this kind of skill you'd have on the same category in a non-virtual team.
That's actually very interesting. So then what would be the specific questions that we can look at?
Well, I think, do you look at the extent of international diversity as a factor?
And we have, obviously, we have that very detailed, measure.
And then I'm not sure, would leadership expectations be something that could be examined?
So how would you define leadership expectation?
Well, you're talking about, let's say, shared leadership where there's more than one leader of the group.
Yep.
I guess leadership structure is how you framed it. And so to the extent that the greater the mix of national cultures, the less likely there'll be a sharing of leadership expectations.
Yeah,
I think that is something.
That actually would be a very interesting study, because I always wanted to do one where we look at how the choice of leadership structure affects team performance. Basically, do teams that have leaders, do they perform better versus teams that have no leaders or teams that have two leaders? But then an equally interesting question is what predicts that leadership structure? Why some teams have no leader and some teams have one formally elected leader and some have two informal leaders? Like, is that again nationality or something else going, or is it purely random? Who knows? Maybe it just, but that would be an interesting study.
If you're predicting leadership, just one moment, I see actually there's two natural competing hypotheses. One is if you have chaos, you have people with different expectations, you might anticipate one person taking charge and bringing a structure to the chaos, right? But on the other side, you might have different views and competing leaders, right? So it's an interesting test. I give you credit for that question.
And by the way, talking about that, maybe we can also look, I'm not sure if it would fit in the expectations part, but we can look at the satisfaction, because in among other things, we also test how satisfied they are with the team leadership and coordination. And I don't know, maybe some people are happy when there is no leader and others are happy when there is a leader. And so maybe it's about alignment between expectations and structure. So maybe there is no perfect structure. It's all about how that structure matches the expectations. I don't know. So it seems like we may end up with a pretty complicated model here, but it would be an interesting question. Because for me, the practical answer that I was looking for was, should we recommend that the teams formally elect a leader? So the question always is, should we force the teams to have an election and appoint a leader? Or is it better when there is no leader? But then the answer is maybe neither is correct. Maybe it all depends on what kind of team you have. Maybe for some teams it is better to have a leader, and for others it's better to have no leader or two leaders or three leaders. Who knows? So
Yeah, there's a 2013 paper by Lionel Robert where he's talking about how satisfaction is facilitated by shared leadership, individual trust, and autonomy. But I can see this tying into the literature.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think this leadership track is very promising because there are many papers there, and you know, it can become almost like a research stream, not just a study, a paper.
Well, and Charles and Vaz, I ran across one. I even printed it out. It's in Group Decision and Negotiation. I'm not sure what quality that journal is. It's a Springer journal, but Emergent Leadership in Self-Managed Virtual Teams. So it's a pretty good introduction into emergent leadership and some of the aspects of virtual teams. I'm sure there could be offshoots of that using all of this data. It's something to go look at. It's a 2006 paper.
Mm-hmm.
Can you send the citation to the chat?
Yeah, actually I can. Well, good suggestion. Thanks.
As a whole new study, if I can propose, I'm not sure, I would probably want to have co-authors on this one. I would not be able to manage it myself, not my area, but something that is very interesting to me. Is conflict always bad? So as I said, we do measure conflict and different types of conflicts longitudinally, and presumably conflicts are bad. So we always look at that number, and I'm trying to keep it as low as possible. But then there is a whole body of literature that says that constructive conflict, or conflict perhaps related to the task, is actually good. Especially, I assume, if you have no interpersonal conflicts, but a lot of conflicts related to the process and the task, maybe it's actually good. And so I thought it might be an interesting study to see, you know, how those different type of conflicts in the team, how they relate to both the quality of the work they produce, but also other, you know, indicators of team effectiveness, like, I don't know, satisfaction with one another, like, you know, whatever else we make, you know, include in the team effectiveness. And so it seems to me it could be a fairly simple study, but it would be an interesting, informative, you know, outcome as to whether or not conflicts hinder performance or aid performance, or maybe different type of conflict is good, you know, some are good and some are bad, or maybe conflicts, you know, at the beginning are bad, but at the end are good, or the other way around. So it seems like we can have several different interesting, you know, trajectories going on there. And so I wonder if anyone is familiar with this topic and wants to join me on this. Because we never really looked at the conflicts, as I said, other than using the number of conflicts as a measure of team effectiveness, presuming that no conflicts is good and conflicts are bad. So I don't know. Anyone is familiar with conflicts?
If I may say something, that's...
Yep.
Yes, for certain conflict is a very interesting topic, like many other ideas that I have been listening. What I think might be actually a strong point is that if we are able to link the constructs that we have inside the Xculture database with some hard data that are in the world outside. So, for example, I think it was a very powerful research question, the one we have been working on, that was about ranking and performance, because we were linking something that was inside Xculture with something else that was outside. So, for example, it might be interesting to link, for example, conflict to something that is actually outside of the Xculture data. And I don't know if that might be, for example, yes, this is something that is also in the Xculture database, but it is something that is very solid in the sense that it's outside, that it is actually nationality, for example. Mm-hmm. So if we have something in the relation between conflicts and nationalities, we might try to understand why. And if I can make a general, so another thing might be, for example, spending in education, per capita spending in education and performance, because this is an hard data that is outside. And if I can say something general, what I am always surprised about the Xculture works in general is that, you know, if you look at the OECD report, an International Monetary Fund report, whatever investigation in the international level, the comparison are always between nations. So nations are actually at the core of every international report. On the opposite, in Xculture, we are very shy about that. I don't know if it's because it is a sort of US perspective, that, I don't know, this is just a provocation. Maybe the US is a melting pot of culture, and we don't want to ask where you are from because we are all inside the same community. I don't know if there is something like that, or because we don't want to create, I don't know, any embarrassment to anyone showing differences in nationalities. But on the opposite, this is something we should actually put light on in order to make sense of it. I think we are a little bit shy in that sense.
We are not shy.
I'm very curious about that.
We do ask, and we have on every single student from the very beginning of the project, country of studies. So that's where they are now. Country of origin, that's where they were born. And home country, the country that they can call home. And often you would have someone who was born in Germany, lives in Finland, but feels, I don't know, something else. And so we have the data. It's right
yes,
that we never really...
I know your point of view. Having 3 of them, it seems that nationality doesn't matter anymore. But then, you know, when you speak with colleagues, when
we do have the data. Yeah, sure.
Yes. You realize that actually nationality are very, very important. They actually determine our stereotypes, our way of looking at things. And on the opposite, we do not use them.
Maybe we can do more rankings, national rankings. I mentioned,
Yes, in order to try to understand what is actually going on and trying to linking them to data that are outside of its culture. Like, for example, ranking was a great idea. Spending in education might be another one.
Yeah.
And yes.
Yeah.
But
maybe even, talking about conflicts, the most conflicting and the least conflicting nations, let's...
Complaining is another
students
area
of which nationality report the most conflicts.
Yes, and trying to understand what is going on. Yes, that would be, and I think it would be interesting also for the outside actually world to know.
Actually, something like this, I'm not sure how much scientific value it has, but the popular media, like all those, like Bloomberg's Business Week and New York Times and whoever, if we literally rank the nations on perceptions of conflict, I guess they would jump on that and will say, oh, Americans are the most confrontational. They report the most conflicts. And then, I don't know, Italians never report conflicts. They have the most, cheery outlook on life, so they never see any conflicts. So actually,
I don't know if I am the only one to have this feeling that actually we tend to be shy with the use of nationalities. Maybe it is only my feeling, but this is what I notice in general.
Well, I wrote a few papers about how nationality doesn't, is not a good container for cultural values. So, but yes, I still believe that there is a lot of value in national rankings. And maybe we should do one on conflicts. Is there anything else that we can rank nations on? So cultural intelligence, conflict perceptions. I wonder if there is anything else, like conflict resolution styles, maybe, which nations are more cooperative and which ones are less cooperative. So I don't know, what else can you rank?
Performance and spending in education would be a very interesting area to me.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we have the problem as we had with the ranking that it is actually team performance and we have to look for individual performance. But it might be, for example, peer evaluation and actually the spending in the nation where the student is actually based as in which university, in which nation.
Yeah.
That might be something interesting might be coming out. If I think to my country, for example, I am very curious, for example, regarding Italy. If I look at the ranking, and this is true also for Germany, for example, we tend to be very low in the ranking.
Yeah.
Not just Italy, but also Germany, for example. We have very few German universities that are in the very top. But then let's go and look at other things, like, for example, performance. And we might notice that, for example, that those countries are not so bad in performance, individual performance, as they should be according to university ranking. And some very interesting things might come out.
Actually, Ernesto, you could have opened here, I guess, what's the opposite of Pandora's box, like in a good sense. When we look at rankings, I'm looking at the list of items that we have. And I think it would be interesting to rank nations on all of those. Like, for example, I'm looking at some of them, like acquaintanceship test, how well we know the rest of the team. We can have that, national rankings. Maybe the Italians know most about their team, and maybe Americans don't care and score the lowest on that test. Which nationality is the most proactively, seeking to get to know the team members. Then I'm looking at, for example, attribution bias. Again, potentially an interesting one. So basically which nations attribute problems to themselves versus to the circumstances. Again, we have the data, we can do those rankings. Perceptions of differences and uniqueness and ease of working with people with from other cultures. We can have a national ranking. So I don't know, maybe the Japanese believe that it would be hard to work with the rest of the world.
Yes.
Whereas maybe Spaniards believe that it's easy.
And then I conclude, I am very curious about this topic, because actually most of the people say, this does not matter, it is not important, especially inside the academia and international business people. But then I am pretty certain that this is basically not true.
It matters, it matters.
Behavior. And
the only thing is that I guess, we may be then hated because every time you rank nations, there is someone who's at the bottom of the list.
That says to you that it is important.
Yeah.
And then you realize that people are just lying about it.
So we're kind of bound to upset half of the population of the planet each time, because half of them will be below average.
Yes.
Yeah, but then again, it's something that can actually catch attention of the popular media, and it potentially can lead to some interesting publicity for this. So it seems like it's an interesting idea, and it's relatively easy to do. We may not even try to explain some of those rankings or use external data, as you said, maybe economic development, maybe spending on education, maybe some other things from archival data to see if those things can explain why people from some nations are more this and less that. Yeah. That's a very interesting, actually, list of studies. Maybe we can even do some little data mining before we come to the symposium to see if there are interesting rankings on some of those constructs. So to see if, nations, maybe all of them cluster in the middle anyway. So in that case, we don't really have a case. But maybe on some of those dimensions, there will be a big difference, Okay, anything else? Any other ideas? Then maybe let me quickly review all of the ideas that have been proposed so far, and then we will have one more meeting before the actual event, in which we may then try to select the most promising papers and maybe decide who will be working with whom. And obviously we will be able to change those groupings at the event itself, but at least we'll have a somewhat good idea as to who is working on what. So just to summarize very quickly, so one line of research would be looking, or could be looking, at creativity. William Johnson was the one who came up with that idea initially, but there are several people who kind of provided different looks at it. So maybe we can have something related to creativity from different perspectives. So Zandra was one of them, obviously, today. Did she just leave? It seems like she just left. But then there are several other people. So creativity, what predicts creativity and how it works. Then we have very interesting idea proposed last time by Stefan, who is not here today, satisfaction and complaining. So we get more complaints from some people or students, less from others. Some of them are more satisfied with the team, with the project, with the professor, with the quality of their work, and some are less. And then the question becomes why we see those differences. Is it cultural? Do some people are just not comfortable complaining? Or is it something else? And so it could be very interesting study of, age, university rank, personality, gender, work experience. So it could be an interesting study that looks at how satisfaction, what predicts satisfaction and complaining behavior, both in terms of context of kind of consumer management, but also teamwork, but also maybe as an outcome. So is the satisfaction always bad? Maybe when people are not happy with their team, maybe if people are not happy with their performance, maybe they actually try harder and do better. So it seems like a very interesting study. Then Charles Wankel talked about sustainability last time and provided a little bit more information today. So again, can be as simple as looking at maybe qualitative data as we discussed last time, and to see who is saying more about sustainability, who talks more about sustainability, who uses more language, words related to sustainability and environmental protection, but can be more sophisticated as we discussed this time. Then we talked also about this peak performance alignment. It's a good study. Justin and I are already working on that. The only challenge there that we have a little bit more people involved here, and so But then again, most people will be there. Mariana will be there, Justin will be there, I will be there, so it seems like a good study. A whole study body of literature and research on leadership. And so somebody proposed last time that maybe we should look at team charter. So in some semesters we asked the teams to write a team contract, and in some we didn't. And some said maybe we should see how that relates to the team leadership structure and performance, but also leadership by itself. What predicts leadership structure, what leadership structure leads to. So it could be a whole body of research. Cultural values. So Anna and I thought about doing a study on cultural values, cultural value instruments, which ones are better, which ones are worse, evaluation. Cultural intelligence, Nicole added here, it's apparently some new entry, but it's definitely a whole body of, we've done a few studies with Nicole on that, and so it looks like she added some more stuff, so social integration and performance. Cultural intelligence comparison and ranking, definitely we want to do that. So we spoke about that with Eric some time ago, and we have a whole team of people involved in this stream of research. Seems like a very, very good study to do. I bet that people from some countries will tend to be more culturally intelligent than from others, at least in terms of, interest in communicating with people from other cultures and stuff like that, knowledge about other cultures. It would be an interesting test of the stereotype. I know those of you not in the United States, you always make fun of Americans that they don't know about the rest of the world. I do make those jokes sometimes myself, but I'm curious to know if it's really true. And we do ask people, a set of questions about other cultures that have right and wrong answers. And so I don't know, I will not be surprised if Americans actually score as high as Italians, even though I'm sure Italians believe that they know more about the rest of the world.
Yes, stereotypes, I think, is a very interesting topic.
Yeah, I don't know. Or if it turns out that Americans do score the lowest.
Yes,
It's interesting ranking.
very interesting because very often the data go in the opposite direction of stereotypes. So it is
exactly.
The county where St. John's is, Queens County in New York City, we have 159 different nationalities. We have Farsi-speaking neighborhoods.
Yeah, actually, you're right. In New York, there you have like the whole world within one block. So I don't know. We'll have to see. But, it's an interesting question. And I don't know the answer. So it would be interesting to just simply take a look and test. And then today we discussed conflicts. So we thought about maybe in addition to creativity and all those other. So conflicts, is conflict always bad? What predicts the number of conflicts? Things like that. Another one, team development stages. Again, what predicts, how fast the team gets to performance. And then if they do they actually produce a better, report or not? Sustainability, another angle. Charles here proposed that. So we talked about leadership, conflict, all kinds of rankings, on national rankings on conflict resolution styles, propensity to see a conflict, propensity to see either people as different, all kinds of things here. And one more thing that I didn't mention last time, I want to reiterate it. We have hundreds of thousands of pages of qualitative data, and somehow we never really did anything with those qualitative data. I have hired a few students who are now coding those data for topics and tone of the comment, but I don't even know what we're going to do with that. And so if anyone is into qualitative research, every time somebody says, let's work on it, and somehow it never leads anywhere. But we have a lot of comments, like weekly comments, weekly journals. It seems like it's a whole, promising line of research. If anyone wants to take the lead on that one. So seems like a promising, anything else? Did I miss anything? Then I suggest let's do the following. So I'll also add them to the shared Google Docs file, the new ideas. If you have any more ideas, please add them too. And maybe start thinking about which studies you would like to kind of lead, and maybe which studies you might be interested in joining as a kind of non-lead co-author. And in the next meeting, we will try then to select, 3, 4, 5 specific most promising studies that we will focus on during the hackathon. And maybe even start looking at the data before the event so that we have some understanding what the data are telling us. And then maybe also trying to kind of get an idea of who's going to be working with whom. Again, if you prefer to work alone, that's perfectly fine. If you want to work with co-authors, I guess even better. So our only goal here is that ideally we want to have no more than 5 projects in development, meaning that there will be probably co-authors on all of them or most of them. So we'll see from there. So would that work? Does that sound like a good idea? Then yes, I'll type up everything, send you the link so you can comment. And by the way, even if you're not interested in a particular study, but you have something to say about it, please do provide your comments. Like, for example, Nicole here provided a few IC links here to studies that I'm not sure if she's going to work on, but it's useful input. So any comments, any suggestions, or criticism for that matter will be very useful to those who will be working on those studies. So, okay. Well, then, yeah, thank you so much. I'll share the recording with everyone, with the people who could not attend. And then again, special thank you to Nicole and Alex for the administrative side. We already paid for the hotel, so we're good with that. And I'm not sure if we need to do any other prepayments before we actually arrive, food and stuff like that. Probably not, right?
No, I think everything is fine.
Yeah.
Just add on that, and we will send around next week information letter where you have the hotel address in and some information on the dinners. I think Eva has already contacted everybody to get some preferences, if there are vegans or vegetarians,
Yep.
and then we take care of all of that.
Yeah. And maybe closer to the event, we might want to coordinate the logistics. I assume everybody will be arriving in Copenhagen, and then, I assume the buses or trains go regularly, but maybe we want to meet somewhere and then go in groups. Looking at the one we did in Wisconsin, the hackathon, we had to take a bus, and I think it was like a 3-hour drive or something like that. And actually, it was a lot of fun to be on the bus together and so get to know people. And so that was an important part of the experience too. So we don't want to miss that opportunity here. Okay, well then, yeah. So we'll see each other, I guess, in 2 weeks for the webinar, and then in another week or so at the actual event. So. All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.